So what site should we go to?
CodePen.io. CodePen.io.
Yeah, I know CodePen, but I was wondering what over this. Where's this?
Oh, this is, I told you before, this is just the welcome element.
What? You can't do all that. Wait, what? So where's the SVG? I don't see anything compiled or what do you, man?
Your HTML, I'm telling you.
Voodoo.
Yeah. No, seriously,
Front-end.
CodePen lets you put stuff in the head, and here's the style sheet that does all that.
Ah, that's pretty creative.
You hit it.
Yes. Yep. And actually, that's super useful for like storing your web fonts or anything where it's like, it doesn't really have to do with the demo, it's just for making it pretty. I'll often take the CSS out of the pane and shove it in there so people don't focus on the wrong thing.
Oh, well, that's pretty clever. All I do is I create a comment on my CSS and say, stuff, styling, not for demo.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And my basic template, I think, includes the base tag in the head, and it's like target underscore parent. So, you know, when you click on something in here, it doesn't do it inside of the CodePen frame. It actually takes you out somewhere. Because that drives me crazy. I don't know why that isn't the default, but Chris said he would break old pens if he did that. Okay, so I guess we're as ready as
Yeah, take
we're
it away,
gonna be.
man.
Okay.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first? What do you do? Why SVG? Kind of just to let people know what you do and all that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would say I got into SVG specifically because probably the first thing I did when I got access to the internet was look up comics on there. And I got into SVG because when comics are put on the internet, they're kind of gigantic image files. And that doesn't really do anyone any good. You know, Google can't look at them. Assistive technology doesn't really know what to make of them. Even if you put good alt text in there, you know, there's a lot more structure than just the simple string of alt text can provide. In fact, I actually have a tech demo of specifically that goal. Yeah, so it's supposed to have little navigation things to the left and right, but
So what is this thing you're showing us here?
this is kind of my thesis statement. Yeah, I'm trying to find a part with word balloons. Well, here's something. So here's the original JPEG version of comic, and here is a converted SVG version. And so what I do is I separate it into borders, artwork, and word balloons. And just by doing that, you know, the JPEG had less colors to encode. It had less surface area because it could skip the gutters. It was only encoding these. And so it made a very significant dent in the file size. And by doing this, you can even do things where this becomes a responsive image, because with the full comic, you wouldn't really want a responsive image because maybe the resolution would get so small you couldn't even read the text. You know, there's that very real danger. But because the text is now a vector, you know, you can zoom in as much as you like and you'll be able to read it as large as you like. So, and then, you know, you can do things like, even if you have a hand letterer, you can put SVG text overlaid on top, turn it invisible for screen readers. And I did double check what Google says about that. And invisible text is not automatically a black flag against you. They will have their audit team check it out if you're doing anything sketchy. And in this case, I feel like it's obvious I'm not doing anything sketchy. And then some other really cool things about SVG is this is actually text. I can select it and copy and paste it.
Funny how the selection takes the same styling.
Yeah, only Firefox does that. In Chrome, that doesn't happen. I think it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's pretty particular.
Yeah, so all sorts of stuff. So like this will run in IE6, but it won't use vectors. It'll run in Opera Mini. Turns out Opera Mini supports SVG, so that wasn't very difficult.
I like your pixelated Explorer logo.
Yeah, would you believe that's SVG? Let's see here. Yeah, so I wanted the pixels to be sharp no matter what you viewed it at. So each pixel is actually like a vector. So you know, if you look in the source, it's just SVG.
So you didn't have to make it pixelated, is what you're saying.
Oh, this is fully intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Well, I mean, like, you show the Internet Explorer logo can mean anything. You show people the old, terrible Windows 98 when you're in Internet Explorer's logo. They know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, this entire thing is SVG. Not a whole lot of speech balloons, which in retrospect was my mistake. This is me showing that, for very simple, clean line art, it's ridiculous. This?
Where is this page? I can't read that from here.
Oh, well, that's intentional because this is my personal website and it's on pay-as-you-go, and money is a little tight this week. So I highly recommend the host, though. It's nearlyfreespeech.net. They have amazingly rock-bottom prices, and it's pay-as-you-go. So I think, I put in $5 6 months ago. It hasn't run out yet.
Yeah, I use them too. They're great.
Yeah. Okay. Nearlyfreespeech.net. And the trade-off is, the reason they're so cheap is because they offer basically no technical support. They expect you to know your way around the command line and diagnose your own problems. So yeah, so that took too long. I'm sorry. Okay, so if you have ever wondered what SVG was and then you tried to find a file and make sense of it and you couldn't, maybe you exported something from Illustrator and you looked at it, or you looked at someone's really complicated tech demo. Illustrator is about as good at writing SVGs as Microsoft Word is at writing HTML. So don't feel bad if it looked terrible and intimidating, because it was in fact terrible and intimidating, and that was not necessary. There we go.
Yeah, I haven't seen any graphics software that outputs decent, clean SVG
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
markup, except maybe Inkscape.
Yeah,
I haven't worked with it too
if you
well.
if you toggle the right settings, Inkscape will do it. Yeah, I do love Inkscape. It's wonderful.
But it doesn't work on
What?
my retina. It looks like
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And you have to download Xcorts because it doesn't run in the native Windows system.
I don't want to
It's kind of a pile sometimes. So this is the output of Adobe Illustrator when I just drew a rectangle. All this. And so, if you were to look at that, you'd probably think SVG is very complicated. And this is what you actually need for that rectangle right there. The same exact rendering between the two of them. And it's stretchy, so that's why it's a little larger and smaller. So we're going to start, and I encourage you to follow along because it's much easier to remember when you see the results of what you write with your hands actually shows up.
I can't find where you are.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's an empty CodePen.
No, but you mean to follow on your machine, right?
Yeah, can I not see the one you were working on, or you're not
Yeah.
how does this work? Am I supposed to be able to have on my screen exactly what you have on your screen?
I think Taylor's suggestion that you create your own pen and go along with your own
Oh.
environment.
Oh yeah, my bad.
Ricardo has a professor mode.
No. Professor Mo wasn't working very well. There is a link. Are you on the Slack channel?
I can.
Do you
I put a
see
link there to the Google Hangout.
Okay.
So when you join the Hangout, you will see what the presenter is showing because he's sharing his screen. So in your screen, you'll see this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was.
Which is
hoping
the-
Okay, and so since we have a intimate number of people here tonight instead of small or something like that, feel free to just blurt out a question if something is confusing or bizarre, because there's a lot about SVG that is confusing or bizarre, and I will answer it to the best of my ability. So what you want to do is go to CodePen.io. If you have a new pen button in your upper right, go ahead and click that so you set up something brand new. And then all you need to write is SVG tag and a closing SVG tag.
Actually, can you just write SVG tab and it'll use Emmet?
Yeah, go ahead if you want to use Emmet or some other HTML preprocessor. World's your oyster.
I'm sorry,
I
you
can't.
don't have to specifically declare.
All right, so the first element in SVG is one that's not terribly impressive because you have probably done something very similar to this with HTML before, but we got to start somewhere, and so it is the rect element. Well, in this case, you can actually write the rect element like that with a closing tag. But in the SVG, you can actually do this trick with the self-closing flag, and that's a little more succinct. And so you'll need width and height, and then you should have a very unimpressive black rectangle pop up on your screen.
Okay, are those dimensions pixels?
Yes, right now they are pixels. And so,
unless you declare another unit,
yeah, you can, for
it
example,
will turn
I
into
can
that unit.
put M,
Otherwise-
then it'll get taller.
So no unit is default pixels. Okay.
Yes, by default, a empty unit in SVG is pixels, and so you can use percentages, whatever normal CSS lengths you have in there. I don't think the viewport units work yet. No, they don't, but they will eventually. And if you play around with the attributes, you may discover that the rectangle doesn't really get that big, even if you feed it some obscenely large number.
Oh yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, and the reason for this is the SVG tag by default is not very big. I don't know if you can see that. Here. That's the default size of the SVG element. It's 300 pixels wide by 150 pixels tall. There's no reason for that. It's the same size as if you have an iframe and you don't size it any. So, in CSS, you can set the width and height to whatever you want. So let's set it to be the screen.
So wait a second. So the default. So the default width of the SVG is 300 by 150.
Mhm.
So the rectangle inside that frame was 10,000 by 50,000.
Right, but it wasn't being drawn because the SVG itself was small.
Okay, so it's not like drawing an overflow thing. It's just that it's getting shrink down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, hold on a second. No, that doesn't work. Okay, so yeah, basically it's like the SVG tag always has overflow hidden set on it.
So it's actually rendering a rectangle that's 10,000 pixels wide, but it's just contained within the SVG element.
I mean, God, I hope the browser is smarter than that, but yeah, that's more or less what's happening.
Okay.
And so you can set it in the the CSS, and in this case, I'm going to need HTML and body. Otherwise, they don't. I can fill the whole screen with that.
What about the cube box? The cube box is within the SVG.
Yep, we'll get to that. Don't worry.
Good question.
So we have this not very exciting rectangle here, and then if you want to move the rectangle around, you have the X attribute and the Y. You can just move your little box around the screen however you like. And you can think of the X and Y attributes almost as like position absolute in the top and left properties. You can give them negative numbers. You can give them lengths like before if you really wanted to.
So I did not make my CSS your width 100%.
Yeah.
So this is really good. It explains some of my frustration in the past is that the default for the SVG is of this size. As you said, the height and width rectangle is not even on the screen.
Yeah.
And that's because it's not in that SVG dotted box.
Yeah.
So it is overflow
It's
hidden.
like a layer mask or something.
Exactly.
It's like a little
Yeah.
window.
Okay.
Is that window the elements right?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, you can almost think of it as an iframe, really.
Right. Ah, okay.
Except it doesn't have scroll bars.
So here in the SVG tag, which I kind of moved to is the view box, increasing that, or you could override that with the CSS.
Yeah.
And as you've done, do it with the
I thought the view box was mandatory.
We'll get to that because it is very useful. So you can also put the width and height attributes on the SVG itself. It'll be overridden by the CSS, but it's nice if you have like an icon and have you ever seen a page load and the CSS is broken, and so it just gives you the like white background and black serif text and blue links? So that's nice because if you, you know, if you have a logo, you don't want the logo to like be cut off by the 300 by 150.
Mhm.
You want it to actually be the size of the logo. So you would have like width and height attributes, kind of like your image tags.
So CSS rules out.
Yep. Yeah, CSS wins over the width and height attributes, much like the image tag. So, and in this case, the SVG will scale to be as big as the viewport you gives it, which has its uses, but you know, you're kind of like, you know, I want my scalable vector graphic to scale up and down. And that is where the view box attribute comes in. Numbers there.
Do you miss a comma there?
Nope, I did not. The box is just off the screen. Not in HTML. So if you're writing it inside of your HTML like this, you can case your stuff.
After the second zero, is there a comma there?
There can be. It doesn't matter.
Really?
Yep. You can have commas. You can have no commas. Doesn't really matter.
Okay, well,
There we go. There's the rectangle. Okay.
So
but you can
I
combine.
need to tell me,
sorry.
what's the difference between viewbox and just putting the width and height on this SVG?
Right. So if you have just the width and height and you don't put a view box on there, then the SVG, if you have like, you know, X, whatever, it will be 5 pixels on the screen, right?
Mhm.
But if you say make the SVG, you know, if you don't give it a whole lot of space, even if it's like width 100%, then it'll just cut off everything after the amount it's actually showing you. Like it won't shrink down any. Let me give you a better example.
Yeah, I'm not grabbing it. It's fine.
So here's the next element. It's a little fancier.
The scaling of the element inside.
Yes.
Okay. So is the view, is there, maybe if like we put a border on every single thing so that we knew what, like I can't tell what's contained in the circle right now. I did that when I designed something, I just didn't see what the hell inside it was.
Oh, yeah, it didn't work. Oh, well, the outline is when you're kind of focused.
Yeah, something like that. I think it's because it was technically as wide as the screen and the outline comes out. Okay, so
Overriding CSS.
there we go. Okay.
Okay.
So this border is actually the SVG itself. And
Okay.
let's say,
Size element anymore. Oh, the CSS is overriding.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. Yeah.
so I'll go ahead and get rid of the view box to show you what it's like without it. So we got all this going on, and then oh, right, I put these in.
Okay.
So let's say 50
The
pixels.
SVG tag really just kind of like a dish.
It's like a magic div, yeah. You can put different tags inside of it, and it'll do funny things.
I love that.
So like, for example, I have my circle here, and it's 50 pixels by 50 pixels, and it's 100 pixels, something like that. I'll make it a little more visible. But if I were to make it smaller, then it would just get overflow hidden.
Oh, okay,
So that's where the view box makes it.
okay.
So the view box is kind of like, okay, by default, 0, 0 in an SVG, maybe the upper right, and then, you know, it's as
Upper left.
wide as it gets, upper left.
Now I understand the problem that I
Yeah.
had once before. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so the view box essentially says the first 2 numbers are going to be kind of like your, where the upper left is going to be, yeah, where your X and Y coordinates start. I always set to 0, 0 because then you don't even have to think about it. It's just easy.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of good reasons to set it to something else. And then in this case,
If you're doing some signing.
Yeah. So notice I got a lot bigger, and that's because the circle has a radius of 100 pixels, which means its diameter is going to be twice as big as the box we just gave the
So
SVG.
the U-box is actually bigger than the SVG tag at this point, like, or because the SVG tag is controlled by the CSS.
Well, actually, in this case, we can go ahead and get rid of the sizing information in the SVG. And the view box is gonna kind of stay the same. So when you add a view box to an SVG, so, let's get rid of that for a second.
Super counterintuitive.
Yeah. So now it's back to 300 pixels by 150 pixels. As soon as you add a view box,
Yeah.
the browser is going to make it 100% width. And in this case, because it's 100 by 100 view box,
Right.
that's going to end up being about the same.
So, can you take those 100 down half or
Yeah.
to a quarter
Oh, in the view box?
in the view box? So make it 25.
Yeah. So you can actually zoom in using the view box if you wanted.
I'm trying to determine if the view box is a constraining element, or as you said, it is a mask element.
Well, it's kind of saying, like, if you set a view box on there, you're saying, okay, the upper left corner of the SVG starts with is this coordinate here. And then it says the lower right coordinate is these two here.
You're like setting a resolution or a scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
You're like setting up your own grid,
Okay, I
more or
was gonna
less.
say, because clearly the circle is bigger than 50 pixels. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay.
like, it's not constraining.
Oh, that's confusing, but this is so loud. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's absolutely confusing. The only way to really understand is to make horrible mistakes with it like this in front of you. So
This is great.
I apologize if that was frustrating to anyone, but
No, now we explain. I mean, I'm good.
So if you make the shape
Mhm.
larger than the U box, it's going to.
be cut off, right? And if you position the shape
Makes sense.
off the side of the view box, for example, I'm going to set the center of the circle to -50. Now look, it's almost not there at all anymore because now it's -50, but the view box only goes to 0, 0.
The circles numbers are what does it say? I can't actually read everything on the circle, but it's not the that's its position.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Alright.
yeah,
So-
the circle has CX and CY attributes.
What is that?
Instead of X and Y, it's the center of the circle.
Oh,
Mm.
got it.
Because normally the X and Y attributes are the upper left of an element. But for a circle, you'd be like, I don't even know where the upper left of a circle is. So instead it has CX and CY.
So what you're doing there with CX minus 20 pixels, you're telling, okay, take the center of the circle and move it 20 pixels to the left.
It is very.
Move it, and because
Yeah, but I
we start at 0 for the X coordinate in the SVG view box, that means it's being hidden off the screen.
Gotcha. So if you put 20 pixels in the first value of view box, it's gonna put it in the center.
If I put 20 there, then it'll come off even more because now the view box starts at 20.
So what do you have to do there to put it on in the center? Minus 40 or minus 20 or?
Yeah, you can put negative numbers in the view box. I don't really recommend doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it gets a little like it.
So really, putting a
Okay.
unit on these numbers is pointless.
Oh, you can't put a unit on the view box.
No, I meant even the CX and stuff. I mean,
Yes, you can take these off, and it doesn't matter to the
it's
SVG.
almost like misleading to put a unit on it at this point.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be a physical pixel or anything. like that.
Exactly.
Like, what would happen if can you put M's or something? Like
Oh, totally.
that?
Yeah. You can put M on there. See, I'm gonna make it really huge.
Like,
There we go.
Okay.
So what is it based on? Is it relative? It's gotta be relative to something.
Right. So
But you can't put units on the view box.
that's correct. It's tricky, right?
Because, I'm, like, I love doing all friends, but, if just they need controlling something really, really well. I don't know.
So you can put an M on here, and then strangely enough, that's where you can say, font size is 32,
Um,
and then they'll get really big.
oh.
Yeah. So the M doesn't really have a whole lot of usage in SVG because things don't like squash and position themselves naturally like HTML. But if you want something to be like, a ratio of something going on in the entire thing,
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
yeah, then you could like dynamically set the font size or something like that, and then the entire SVG set and ends would react.
The view box those data values are mapping,
Correct. Yeah. It's like
which is why they don't have the correlation.
it's
They're mapping points.
yeah. It's a coordinate system.
That's,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
coordinate
Yeah.
system.
I tried not to lead with that word because you know, it's not exactly a super intuitive concept, but whatever works for you. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this border
Sure.
because it's taking up a bit of the screen here. Yeah.
I mean, thank you for doing it. Demonstrating.
Oh, absolutely. So in this case, we're just going to have the screen be as wide as it can, that sort of thing.
So the circle is 20, or negative 20,
Yeah.
from the center.
No, from
From the center of the circle, yeah.
the center of the circle is positioned 20 pixels off of the view box because the view box right now is set to 0, 0. If I were to set the view box in negative 20, then the center of the circle would be right on the edge of the view box. Yeah.
Sure, so it's really.
So a circle that is, center of a circle is 20 and x, and I'm taking away the negatives, and
Yeah.
cy, then it's really a oval.
Yeah, so it's 50 pixels down from the top.
No, it's always a circle. Here, I see where you're going. It's always a circle because you're just setting the
But it's
radius.
the position
That's just the position of the center.
where that
Yeah.
center is.
Yeah, CX and CY just moves the one around. The radius is,
I
you know,
wanna
how
know
big
if
it
they
is.
use color.
Oh yeah, well I'll get to that.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is an ellipse element which is almost identical to the circle, except it takes R.
Is G.
Exactly. So you know, I'm going to put it right where the circle currently is. 20 and then 40.
You actually get an ellipse though?
Yep.
Okay.
Right, because I thought like ellipses were two centers.
Well, it's two foci, and you think you have to specify both of those, but if this implies that it's two different radii, so then one, it would be like an egg. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
one would be bigger
Yeah, it is a little weird, but in the end, it works
than
okay.
Maybe you think this is better, but that's all.
Okay, so as far as color goes, there is the fill attribute, and that will take any color you can throw at it. So even if you want, you know, some fancy transparent colors, you can. And then you can see the ellipse is sitting on top of the circle.
Hey, can I ask you, what, I don't want to jump ahead, but polyfill, every time I look up stuff about SVG and coloring it with CSS and everything, they were talking about browsers that do or do not support polyfill. Is that related to fill, or do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
A polyfill is a JavaScript file that enables a feature. It fakes a feature in older browsers that don't support it, basically.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a little confusing, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. A British guy came up with it, so it's not even a product we have here in the United States. But polyfill over there is spackle, basically. So he was talking about spackling over the cracks in browser support with JavaScript. As far as SVG support is, I would actually say, unless you worry about IE8, you're gold.
Yeah, okay.
It's near universal at this point. Even Opera Mini and UC Mini support it.
Just a little an example of a polyfill. You're using HTML5 elements, but IE8 doesn't support them. So what you do is you call in the HTML5 shiv or shim. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I know that particular.
That is
Yeah.
a polyfill.
Oh,
You're
really?
polyfilling IE8
Uh-huh.
and down now it's at 6 to support, understand header, nav, footer, all these HTML5
Yeah, I thought it just
specific.
registers them as like acceptable elements.
Yeah, IE had a quirk
Yeah,
where it
kind
let
of
you do
makes-
that.
It plays with the JavaScript engineering these older browsers to make them understand. Okay, header. Oh, okay, that's a div.
Yeah.
It's a translator. It's a div. Okay, so
Yeah, I used shit a ton. I didn't know what it did.
yes, that's a polyfill.
If it did, I would have
Yeah.
just wrote my own.
Yeah, in particular, if you do have to support IE8, there is an old script called Raphael where you would give it SVG code, it would parse the page, and then re-implement the shapes you were drawing in IE8's old bad vector engine, which was VML, vector markup language. Don't look up VML; it's very confusing and bad.
Okay, I'm doing
Yeah.
my
Yep. Okay.
18.
And so you can probably see that the drawing order, the z-index almost of the SVG is determined by the source order. So, this gets drawn first, then this on top of that, and then this will be drawn on top of it. So I'll just draw that right on top of there.
And the opacities in the same sequence.
Attribute that you can set if you want.
You could change that dynamically with JavaScript or something.
Yes, in fact, you could even set that in CSS. So, yeah, so I'm going to idle this garbage for a second.
That is the Dayton Dragons.
Okay, I'll pause real fast for everybody here. These guys here rented the parking lot to a nonprofit organization that is going to use this parking lot for the game. So those guys are charging $5 per car to park here in the parking lot tonight. So I wasn't told about that only when I got here.
So they're gonna charge us $5 to get out?
So that's what I did. So no. So where I'm going is, so the option is you guys can pay them the $5, or you can move your car over to across the street. There's a offset where you can park over there. So that's
Tonight?
yes.
In the next 45 minutes?
Yeah. This is open until until we end, which should be pretty much until a little later. So.
Well, how many
Just
people
so
are
you
here?
There are 7 of us plus 2 children.
Okay, I can pay for that. Let's not interrupt.
You're paying $5 for your hosting.
Oh. Well, I'd rather we be able to focus, so I'd gladly pay $35 for that.
I'm lost.
Okay,
Yeah,
$30.
It's don't worry.
I'll
It's a non-profit, so no big deal. We can meet up and cover that. I didn't know.
So, you can set many SVG properties in CSS. Not all of them. There's no such thing as doing this. Can't do that yet. Nightly Chrome does support it. SVG2 is making it a reality. You will be able to set any SVG attribute from CSS soon.
Even like
Wow, that's cool.
the CX and CY and the radius and those things.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Which is going to make for some stupendously confusing looking CSS, but it is what it is. And so the cool thing.
I don't even want to see a SAS mixing with that.
I just said that.
Yeah.
So-
So
You right, it makes it.
You already see these crazy mixes.
It is perfectly capable, and you can create malware in CSS.
oh yeah, I'm sure.
When now?
Yeah, that is, could create malware.
And so because it's just CSS, you can use hover effects,
I'm all about
and
it.
I believe these. So.
Oh, no way.
There we go. Yeah, and I believe in most newer browsers, you can even use the animation property. So the world is your oyster in that regard. I think only Edge supports it. IE 11 and below don't. Whatever. You probably guessed that.
What'd you do to trigger it though? Because you didn't like.
Do
It's a hover.
Oh, you got it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. So SVG supports hover. It supports
You're tickling my nerve.
it supports active, so it won't change until I actually click on it. That sort of thing. It supports focus too, but in order to get an SVG element to be focusable, you have to. Yeah, you have to add it. Because they're just graphics elements. There's nothing to focus on.
Yeah, I'm not going to the iframe.
Yeah.
So what if you wanted to scale the entire thing with CSS? The viewbox, everything can stay just as it is. Everything inside will stay relative to that viewbox.
Yes. So
Okay.
so instead of width 100%,
Yeah.
let's make it half as wide as the screen.
Right.
There you go.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah. So that's how you make SVG responsive. Basically, is you have to add a viewbox.
Yeah.
Well, that's not I'll show you some responsive SVGs that don't use a view box, because I brought a couple of things I actually made at my job with SVG that ended up being very useful, but we'll get to that eventually.
Like they wouldn't just fill like the container they were in, like if it was like like say an absolute position.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. Basically, it's stuff like a rectangle with a percentage width, so it doesn't matter what corners it has because it's a percentage of the actual space the SVG is taking up.
Okay.
So it's responsive in that sense, more or less. Yeah. Okay. We move this. I'm going to put this dead center, actually, just to make things a little simpler. Okay. All right.
Is SVG like really heavy on the browser, processing wise and stuff?
No, that's just CodePen.
Oh, okay.
Because every time I make a change in here, it sucks out the code in there and then refreshes the iframe with it. So that's a full page reload happening every time. Yeah.
Just a particular note about CodePen and performance. I was looking into the HTML view of the code, how it's colored and all that, and every single element is a span.
Yeah.
Inside the HTML, so you have the bracket, that's a span.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, actually, you know what that is? That's a Code Mirror, which is a fantastic third-party library you can use if you want to have a source code editor in the browser. And the reason why Code Mirror is so heavy is because it has to use the world's nastiest hacks to make a nice text editor in the browser. You know what you're actually typing into when you type into this? It is a absolutely positioned, zero opacity text area. Because he can't get stuff like select all, copy paste events very nicely inside a content editable thing because there's so many bugs. So it's just hacks on top of hacks on top of hacks. I'm amazed it works at all.
I'm surprised it needs to be that complex. Like how you go on like chat forums or not,
Yeah.
but like they use just some quick markdown.
Right. Well, see, the thing is, whenever you do something like paste something or hit enter or something like that in content editable, the browser will insert its own elements, and it'll name them things like Apple style span or something like that. And so, that'll just junk things up, and eventually, if you're writing a lot, like source code, mysterious things begin happening, and no one wants that.
But your original question about the weights of mathematical equations versus the raster graphics, SVG is going to win out all the time.
Sure.
Yeah, it depends on what you're drawing. Like, if you're drawing something with clean, sharp lines and just gradients, something like that.
File size would be smaller, but I didn't know about because now file size is smaller, but is it easier, say, processing power for the browser to show the image or to calculate the SVG?
It depends on the SVG. So something like this circle, you can't even measure that. It's so small. If you had 1 million paths, then yeah, that would probably take a while. So don't draw 1 million paths.
Right.
But
Are you going to talk about any optimizers?
I'm only going to talk about one optimizer. It's the only one you need to know about.
Yourself, the way you write it.
I may have hand optimized a few SVGs in my time, but I don't recommend doing that unless you really need to. So like, there's an official version of the Firefox logo, which is an SVG, and that's got like gradients on top of gradients. It's got, the shapes of the countries on the globe that the fox is circling. Those are like actually real geographic data. So there's like millions of points on those. So if you got the Firefox logo running in the browser because they designed that to export it to ping or something like that, then yeah, that'll be slow. But it's surprisingly not as slow as it used to be. Mm-hmm.
I was mostly with mobile browsers that I was thinking of.
Yeah, actually, if you are really deep in the weeds with SVG, I would recommend not using Chrome to develop them. I would actually say right now Chrome is the worst browser at SVG.
Really?
Which is surprising, right? But it does things like it rounds the pixel values too early. So it's like in everything else, it'll be as big as the screen. In Chrome, it'll be as big as the screen minus 1 pixel. And so then you'll have to do something like make me 101% wide.
When you export from military, I think it asks you like how many decimal places out you want to be. I was wondering if it just needs more precision than like You know what I mean?
No, because it just discards that information and rounds it too early.
Okay.
Basically, what happened is Chrome inherited its SVG code from Safari way back when, and then Safari actually bothered to update it. Chrome not so much. Jake Archibald says they're actually a little bit of ashamed of it right now, and they're planning on what to even do with it in the first place. I would say right now Firefox has the most support for SVG stuff, and it has the nicest rendering by far. It's like really nicely anti-aliased and stuff, but you won't really notice that until you start doing fancier stuff.
I used to have that problem with fonts too. I don't remember way back. The fonts would crack.
Yep.
They couldn't engineer
Yeah.
save your life.
Yeah, Chrome's focus on performance has a lot of good things, but it also has some bad parts, such as their text rendering can be really bad because they try to take shortcuts first instead of later, that sort of thing. But we can go into that all day, I'm sure. The best browser for SVG performance is actually Internet Explorer and Edge in all its incarnations. I get better performance out of IE9 on a terrible old Windows box than on Chrome on this computer.
Wow.
I don't know what magic the IE9 team did back then, but it's like they were actually using the GPU to draw stuff, and Firefox and Chrome with SVG not so much yet. They're working on it, but they haven't gotten there yet. Okay, what is an SVG feature someone has seen and they want to know how to make it go?
Well, we were talking last night about text
Right.
on SVG.
Okay, so manipulate text as if it was a graphics element, and it's a very surprising element that lets you do that. If you just put plain text in an SVG, nothing will happen. It'll actually ignore it.
Can you bring up again of something that listing of the available elements, the circle, the ellipse, the what can we play with?
Oh man, you have no idea. So they're essentially grouped into a bunch of different elements. You have the basic shapes, which circle, ellipse, line, polygon, polyline, rect. You have the animation elements. Ignore those; they're being deprecated.
Really?
Chrome doesn't like them. They say it's bad for performance.
Which ones? Doesn't it have?
Animate color, animate motion. So you'll have to use CSS instead, basically, or JavaScript. You can always use JavaScript.
What's your site?
I'm sorry?
Where's this?
Oh, this is the Mozilla Developer Network, and it's a website sponsored by the guys behind Firefox, and it's just a big wiki on web tech. It's pretty great.
Yes.
Yeah.
My developer just sent me. Here, look at this.
Yeah. And so then you have some descriptive elements for accessibility. You have the desk for descriptions, title for like alt text. You have the filter elements. We're going to skip those for now because they're by far the gnarliest ones. Then you have some font elements. Ignore those too. Those got deprecated. Gradients. These again. Okay.
Light source?
Yeah, when you're working with particular filters, they use like shading and stuff.
Google Light.
Oh, do like CSS filters work on these elements? Like,
CSS filters,
like blur and stuff?
as it turns out, CSS filters are built with SVG. Like in the specification for the CSS filters, each property is given a canonical SVG file that's implementing it. So, in fact, I will show you right now, actually, because so we'll get to the text in just a little bit, but
Yeah, a lot of the or taken from the SVG specification. Text on SVGs. The reason for that is because I'm redesigning my website and my logo is an SVG. So with my name on it, right now I created an SVG where the name is just a graph. And I know it can be done just with text. So the benefits are tremendous from all areas. So I was talking to Taylor last night, and yeah, just use the text, put your name on it, a few pointers here, which I'm sure you're gonna talk about.
Yeah, because
And I was like,
if it's just an SVG, it's not readable.
Right. I mean, you can't select it or anything like that. There's no SEO, right?
Yeah.
So I got home and I got what is called Nerd Snipe. You know what that is? Nerd Snipe. Snipe is when you're faced with on the web development, web design community. Actually, it's based on mathematicians. A very basic problem. You drop everything that you're doing just to solve that dumb problem. So you have people, for example, in Stack Overflow, like, how do you color half of a character? A guy asked, and you got these answers. People just dedicated themselves on creative plugins, jQuery plugins, JavaScript libraries, CSS stuff, and I read that and I got NerdSnipe back then. I created my own pen, which you can share anyway. Going back, so I got NerdSnipe last night, and I was like, I got to do this because I'm working on my site. And so I have a pen that I'm going to show you at the end, if possible, of the original SVG that I'm using right now. The exported SVG from Fireworks with all the garbage and stuff. And the final result, after cleaning it up, aligning everything, putting the name, I had to go to Stack Overflow and all that. So I eventually got it to look exactly like the logo, but it's selectable, and it cut down on the size of my SVG probably 80%.
Oh my God, yeah.
So if you just
Nerd Snipe.
Nerd. Yeah, Nerd Snipe. Just put it on Google and you'll see this little comic about this mathematician trying to challenge another guy.
So you use Fireworks?
I do use Fireworks, yes.
Yeah, I do too, but I thought you said there wasn't anything to export.
Well, you do need a plugin for that. Yes, for Fireworks 6, you do.
Yeah, Illustrator and Inkscape and Sketch are the three that are used right now for generating SVGs a lot.
Affinity Designer is another.
Yeah. Inkscape is free. That's the best thing it's got going for it.
And it's just for SVG, so I gotta use it more.
Switch over to the Sketch vector creation thing. It doesn't. It's too much. I can do better, faster.
So if you just write text inside of a text element and it's got nothing going on, you'll see I'm not really sure what it's doing. It's sitting all the way up there. And the reason for this is because when you give a text a Y position, you say, that position is like right here where it starts drawing the text. It's the line that the text sits on. The other, attributes to text. So, fill, make it green. That's sort of.
So that's the baseline.
Yes.
It's put the baseline in the upper left-hand corner.
Yes, the positioning elements are baselines for text. Yeah.
That makes sense. So when you first threw them in there, it was up the screen because it was at 0.
How come it's not at X0? I'm sorry.
How come it's not a what?
At X0? I don't.
That's a good question, isn't it? And that's because there's all this white space going on here, I think.
Oh God, no, really?
Let's find out.
Yeah, because I didn't have a file all of them.
No, I don't know why it's doing that.
Is it the view box?
Well, based on what I learned last night, which was a great experience, I have my name, and under I have web designer, and there's a tag that you put in the text tag called a T-span. Yeah, so I have a T-span, open and close, my name, and another T-span, open and close, web design. So I don't know if that helps in any way what you're doing.
Yeah, it does help a little bit, yeah.
Because I don't have anything in a single line like you did it there.
There's more tags to put within the text element.
Right. So for assistive technology and like text selection and that sort of thing, a text is considered almost like its own paragraph, more or less. So if you want to mark up text within that element, you have to use the T-span element. There's no.
Text doesn't have its own view box or anything.
Say what?
Text doesn't have its own view box or anything.
No. I still don't know why it's all the way over here. Perhaps we will never know. But on the T-span element, you can position the text even further. Maybe you want that one word to be a little lower. That didn't work. But
Do you have a question?
It's not. But that's now selectable text in the browser, like that's.
Yep.
Like I could wrap that SVG in an H1 and just.
yeah, and Google's weblog specifically said they will index stuff inside SVG.
Nice.
So the font is the default font?
Yep. Right now it's just sans serif.
You can find it in CSS, no problem.
Right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and does it,
I was already-
does it have some
There we
kind of lock?
Yo, let me answer. You taught me last night.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I think she's asking about the alignment.
Right.
Oh,
why it's
okay.
not in the-
Well, turns out it doesn't.
It does not work.
This does though, and by default it's left, so that didn't do anything. That did something though. So
Yeah, text anchor
What did it
middle.
do?
Yes.
so basically, the text anchor changes what the X attribute on the text element corresponds to.
Okay.
That would drive me crazy.
Yeah. So right now the center of the text is at 50 or something like that. You know.
I think it bogs in the precision capability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can easily kind of run yourself into a hole or something like that.
Because it doesn't matter if it's numbered.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre, right? But yeah, in CSS you do that.
Yeah. Regarding that, what I did last night, I have the font that I'm using is a Google font, Lato. I don't know how to say it.
LATO?
Yeah.
That's my favorite font.
So I'm using that, and so what Taylor said, you just import it into your file in any format you want, import or a link or whatever. So I did that, reference on the CSS, and it just worked. It worked right away.
MDN's got to be scanned in CSS.
Oh, you put that back up top. It was like a piece of art all of a sudden. I was like, oh. It's like, look at it. It's freaking perfectly composed.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so like you could hold on.
Except it's got a big
Yeah.
border on the left.
And then you could even select it across your bizarre nonsense going on here. Some other cool stuff you could do with text and T-span.
Is in CSS, and if it wasn't in HTML, it
It's
might be
different
Really?
in this, but
You have to format it.
oh, that doesn't work
rather
on
than
T-span.
equals,
You have to do it on text, I think.
Format.
There we go.
Just rotate.
Yeah. Let's just do 50. But you can rotate it, and it'll
So you
select
are
as
not
text.
drawing those comics like this.
That is killer.
Do-
Can I see your CSS? Are you actually applying anything to the T-span?
I'm making the font family. Yeah, I can totally apply stuff to the T-span if you want like a different fill.
You put a class on the T-span and then.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's
All SVG elements except the class attribute.
Now, one note about with the class and then targeting through the CSS. For that to work, for the CSS to affect the SVG needs to be in the HTML. If you call a file and the file has a .dot class and you do it on CSS, it will not.
You can't see into the file.
Yeah.
That's
Inline SVG.
I love the stuff
Yeah, it's
that's
good.
easy
Inline.
for PHP and just they're like
Yeah.
inline, in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People love doing that. If you do have an image file though, and you need CSS for whatever reason, maybe it's easier than like putting a fill attribute on everything. You can actually put a style attribute right in the SVG, and it'll work with CSS. Yeah, even if it's a standalone XML file, like
Oh,
you
I
normally
guess
put.
I'm not surprised.
Exactly what it is.
Right.
You always see SVGs with like
Yeah.
doc type and all that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it turns out you don't need the doc type. In fact, the specification officially recommends against including one, because it
Why does everything export?
right.
Lazy,
Right.
lazy devs, I guess.
You don't need that. You don't need the like question mark XML thing at the beginning. You don't need. You obviously don't need the comment saying made by Inkscape. I would say like within the first 5 lines, near everything on those 5 lines is garbage. Like even most of the attributes they put on the SVG element are useless and don't do anything. So like the version attribute, nothing. Style, enable background, Illustrator likes that one, that doesn't do anything.
Oh, wow. Okay, here's another one. When we were looking at all the elements that put inside of SVG, you exported just some random, say, Bezier curves or something like that,
Yeah.
and you get massive amounts of points and stuff. But it's not literally, it's obviously it has to somehow know to draw a curve between some of these points.
Yeah.
What is the element or SVG thing that actually makes curves?
Okay, so you have asked about the scariest element in SVG. I'm gonna clear all this if that's all right. Actually, I'm gonna just comment it out. So comments work just like in HTML. It has one very important attribute, which is D. I don't know what D stands for. Maybe data. I don't know. And so then inside of the D attribute is kind of its own mini language for drawing curves and lines and that sort of thing. So I will.
So what you're doing is you're the language of the markup so that if you have a file, export a file, you can go in and alter that file? Or
Yes. Yeah.
you're
If you,
not actually going to build anything in SVG that would be.
No, but you could programmatically, I could write something in JavaScript.
Yeah. Yeah. Or yeah, you could have something like
as long as I know how it's going to draw those curves or by what function, this could be amazing. Oh my god.
Man, knowing how to draw by typing markup there.
Yeah. This is. Hold on. I did something wrong here.
When I was in college, that's how we used to do. GUI and stuff.
There we go.
like that.
Okay.
There was this thing called persistence of vision. It was a 3D modeling language and that you wrote in text.
Here we
And it
are.
would then process that for enormous amounts of time because select. And that's how we would do the art.
Wow.
So yeah, and then so we would write Linux scripts, or well back then we were on like RS6000, so like whatever IBM's Unix, AIX. Oh my God, anybody? You're all young.
So
I don't know. Maybe you're my age.
I'm not that young.
Okay, I'm saying anyway. So we would write scripts that would generate the shapes and points that we needed, and then we would write scripts that would then iterate them to animation frames, and then render one by one by one, and then piss off all the admins at school, and then it was good. So this brings me back, and now of course shit's fast, so it's gonna be good.
Yep. So there's all sorts of nonsense you can put in here. Basically, the mini syntax is.
So are those M's and L's?
Those are pixels.
Is it an M and an L, like M?
Oh yes, my bad. Yeah, that is the letter M and that is the letter L.
And what does that mean?
So M is the move command, and it doesn't actually draw something, but it makes the pen start in a certain location.
Oh, wow.
So like I'll just say at 30, so I'll just move it over by 10.
Okay. Oh, you guys remember the logo from way back?
Just it's exactly like that, yeah.
It's also in the D box, you get your first coordinates there, the end is your first starting coordinate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so L is line, and so it just means draw a line to this, to the next point. And then, you can have multiple points after that if you really want.
So it's line 20 to 20. There's no the limiter between each point. Like you're putting line breaks, but I mean, it would only just be a space if this was all in one line.
Yeah.
Wow, that's terrible.
Oh yeah. Oh, it gets far worse. And there are other commands like C for curve.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was wondering what function it uses for curve. Probably the same thing, but
Cubic, Bezier curve, hence C for cubic. I think I drew it right off the screen. Oh wait, I know what I did. Hold on. A little embarrassing. There we go. So you can see it's got a little bit of a curve. There we are.
Can you do that with your up and down buttons, or do you have to code in the number? Put in a number.
Truthfully, if you're going to do anything with pass, open up your graphic editor and then draw something instead.
Okay.
you really do not want to draw past by yourself. And when your graphics editor spits it out, it'll spit out all sorts of terrible things. Like it'll forget the commas. You don't need them technically, so I'm including them just for clarity reasons.
Then if you use a graphic editor, then you have this great optimizing.
Yeah. So speaking of which, this now is a good time. Introduce this beautiful application called SVG OMG.
No way.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful.
What?
So let's see. Let's find. Oh, here we go.
So her scenario is she's working with an Illustrator.
File.
I'm the illustrator.
Yeah.
I'm the illustrator and the designer.
Well laid out,
Mhm.
high fidelity, put it out, it's a gigabyte file.
Yeah.
It needs to be made ready for the web, so it needs to be optimized.
Yeah.
All the chaff needs to be filtered out.
Yeah. So here in SVG OMG, it's kind enough to include an example file, which is this little SVG car. And here's the original.
So web-based tools, she could upload the entire large file to it.
Yep. It runs in the browser. So this is the original file, straight out of Inkscape. You know, it's pretty ugly. It's got all that useless garbage at the top. And the really neat thing about SVG OMG is that, so click off select original, you can't really see anything, is that it lets you toggle all these options to clean up the SVG.
So that's the chaff.
Yes.
Yeah, but you can see it real time.
Yeah. Not all of it is chaff. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So you know.
What?
Yeah,
What is that word you're using?
Chaff,
it's
What is that?
the outer husk of
It's the part of wheat that you don't eat.
when the wheat grows, it has a thing with chaff around it, and the wheat kernel's inside, and you toss it, and the chaff goes like
okay.
this, and the wheat falls to the ground.
And so, like you mentioned before, you know,
Banana peel.
if you have, you know, your editor exports something with 5 decimal points of precision or something like that, you really don't need all 5 of those. And so SVG OMG has a little slider here for how many decimal points of precision you want. So I'm going to set it to 1. You don't really see anything. But you can toggle this, and there may be a little subtle difference. So in that case, I like to turn on maximum overdrive with multipass. And you can see it's processing away here.
So you don't actually get like zoom in or.
Oh yeah, I can zoom in if I want.
so break the image. Shows some dramatic chaff coding here.
All right.
Man, and somebody made this for us to use free. I mean, I love.
It's Jake Archibald, actually. You ever heard of that guy?
Sounds
Twice.
familiar.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Yeah, he is one of the developer relations for Google Chrome.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So he's a.
You know, I found just as an interesting point or warning, I was exporting some crap from Illustrator the other day. I was making new social media icons, and I was just exporting SVGs. It didn't occur to me, but the layers that were turned off still exported. I was like, what the freaking hell? Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, cool. Why is my social
Yeah.
media icon 200K?
Yeah, SVG OMG may not necessarily pick up on that because it assumes that maybe you're like going to show them later with JavaScript or something. So to a certain extent, you may still have to go into the file and then be like, I know what that is. I'm getting rid of that.
But see, now you just gave me a cool idea.
Yeah. But I always run stuff through SVG OMG first just to clean it up. Like even if I'm not like setting the precision real low or something like that.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Okay, I broke it.
Okay.
I had to go into the dev tools and hack the precision to be lower than usual. So it's like you can see things are a little broken, and then you can always toggle it to say, is that too broken? Okay, I'm gonna hold back a little bit. You can see a little bit of difference there, but depending on what you're using it for, that may be perfectly all right.
Yeah.
Because it'll show you how much you've actually saved according to the original. So like the difference between 2 and 1 here. So it's maybe a 50% saving with 2 decimal points, but with 1 decimal point, it's larger. That's not right.
Actually, SketchUp.
Oh, I broke his logic when I went in and hacked that. So that normally works. It doesn't in this particular case. So there's stuff like
Sorry, you're right. SketchUp is.
it also has a code view up here in case you're curious about what exactly it's doing to your SVG. So I'm going to turn on Prettify to,
That's how I.
yeah, that part's really nice. So let's see here. Clean up attribute white space.
So you could just check it all out, see what it's doing, and then say, don't show the white space.
Exactly. So in fact, I will go ahead and turn off a lot of these.
Wow. You see it changes all the time.
Yeah.
I use in the chat, I put a link to the SVG optimizer tool I use. I mean, it's completely different than this. You just upload the file.
Yeah. In fact, you don't even have to upload. You can paste your SVG code right in.
Yeah, I mean, this is another level. This is an app. This is a web app.
Yeah.
What I use, I mean, I didn't even know this. What I use is just an optimizer where you just upload the file, optimize, it show you the original and the new one, download the file, and it's minimized, optimized, and all that. Never had issues with it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put the link in the Slack.
And you have to be on Slack or CodePen to get into the Slack. You have to get to the Slack program account from CodePen.
No, if you go to slack.codependayton.com.
Just go around, CodePen Dayton. That's
Yeah, excellent. Good. See.
Or yeah, if you go to slack.codependayton.com,
Really?
then you'll be able to join the Slack team there.
Cool. This is so much less magical now. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really neat just like going through here and seeing what exactly it does whenever you flip stuff on. So
when you flip stuff on and the numbers disappear, like you were saying, the white space, if you're eliminating the white space, does that mean it's turning it transparent?
oh no, white spaces is just like the spaces and like it's the actual like space characters and carriage returns and stuff you're putting in the code to make it more readable. But the computer doesn't need any of that, so you can strip it right out.
You heard the term minify?
Yes,
Yeah, that's what it means. Yeah.
but it doesn't look as garbled.
Yeah. So we'll have round rewrite numbers, and it just made all the numbers a little bit smaller. Set that down a little lower,
I mean,
Yeah, if you turn off verified code though.
Yeah. Now it's garbage.
right.
So now your white space is gone.
I see.
Yeah.
So you turn it off before you're done with your work. That way it has the smallest file size.
Yep. And so you can see here we've got some colors going on. And if you hit minify colors, it'll rewrite those to be their shorter versions.
Either on
Round
color
rewrite paths.
name or hex.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 values, because I see red.
Yeah.
And then I see the three numbers on the hex format.
Yeah, I always think it's funny how minifiers are like, oh, we'll turn your CSS into short. We'll even turn it to the color keywords if they're shorter, and that sounds impressive. But there's only 2. It's tan and red, so it's like that's not really a killer feature. Yeah, right. And with red, it's literally like
Black is 5.
Yeah, but you might as well just have #000. That's shorter.
And what?
Yeah, it's 4 characters.
BLCK. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
BLA.
If you reference read a lot.
Yeah. That's pretty much the only one that shows up because nobody uses the color that tan corresponds to because it's really ugly.
This.
The story behind how CSS got those color keywords is hysterical because none of it makes sense and everything's broken. You want to know my favorite CSS piece of garbage is? So we're going to have gray. I'm going to make it gray, right? What do you think happens if I add the word dark in front of gray?
DAR.
Later. Nothing about the CSS color names makes sense.
LIGHT in front of that would give you.
I don't think that exists.
So anything you would prefix the name to turn it lighter.
No, it's just dark gray in particular. It's just a quirk of history.
Wait, hold on. But maybe what happens is that is dark gray a named color?
Yeah. And so
Does HTML name colors that
Yeah.
CSS piggybacked on?
no, those it did borrow some of those, but the parsing is different depending.
But is there a dark gray named color? Because what happens
Yeah.
is there?
Yeah.
Because what happens is that you can put
This
actually
works
Chuck
too.
Norris, and then what happens is that it interprets the letters as
Yeah.
hex. If there
That won't work here.
Right. Oh.
It's just black because that's SVG's default fill color is black.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is that if you put a hex value.
No, HTML is
Demo
so
with that
lenient that it'll go through whatever you write and then it'll fake a color, basically. It'll like discard the characters it doesn't understand. Don't rely on it. It's terrible. Let's see. What's another good one? There's Peach Puff. There we are. Peach Puff.
Favorite is Dodger Blue.
Cornflower Blue.
you guys name when you type on it out? Really?
There is no good reason. If you look at the history, the history is a comedy of errors for sure. Then there's this, which
Who's Rebecca?
Rebecca is the daughter of Eric Meyer, who was a very influential CSS advocate at the time, and his daughter passed away recently, and browsers in memoriam put in Rebecca purple because it was her favorite color.
Yeah. Yeah, I follow that story. That's pretty.
Then there's, like, really, the color names are just endless. And they're how bizarre they are.
Yeah, go here, go to the chat, and go here. Well, no, hold on. We're kind of going from
Let's go back to the numbers.
Right.
Let's go back to SVG.
Right. Yeah. So path.
I know.
Path is the most powerful SVG shape element. It can draw anything the other ones do, but I don't really recommend doing that. If you can use the other elements, and you're going to like interact with them with JavaScript or something like that, it's much easier to change the value of the width attribute than to go into the paths D attribute and then twiddle around the numbers. And the other reason is some of them are in fact shorter. So like if you use circle, it usually ends up being shorter than paths equivalent syntax.
But still, though, you don't even have to change it if you were just building. Say you're building a graph and had bar graphs and stuff, but you needed a curve. You have some data points.
Yep.
You could just spit it out and it draws it right in front of you.
Yeah. And there's like a JavaScript interface
You keep appending to it too, right? And it'll
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's JavaScript methods built onto the path element if you pick it up with JavaScript, where you can say things like, give me the third item in the path list and then shift it up. You should use a library for that, because if there is anything bad about SVG, it's the JavaScript interfaces. They are so bad. They are so bad that how would you guess you would get the number of items inside of an array in SVG's elements? What would be the property you call?
I don't know.
Well, gotcha. Well, in HTML,
Just import the whole thing
in HTML it's length. Right? It's length in HTML. Well, in SVG, for some godforsaken reason that nobody understands, it's number of items. I typed in one too many numbers.
I was gonna say, number of items.
Right, but it's number of items. Why? There is absolutely no reason. SVG was made back when they thought Java was going to be the killer web language. So it inherited a lot of junk from Java. Yeah, so always use a library when you're messing with SVG. Not JavaScript, Java. Yeah.
When you say library, you mean the canonized terms of the language?
No, in fact, it would be a separate JavaScript program that you download and put in your web page, and then
It's already worked out all the functions, and then
Yeah.
functions that for what you want to do.
yeah, basically it's like it takes the terrible SVG methods of interacting with it, and then it makes them nicer for you.
Imagine.
Just somebody's hard work.
Yeah. If you're going to animate SVG specifically, I would recommend GreenSock, because right now animating SVG is kind of like dealing with the DOM back when jQuery was necessary for dealing with the DOM across browsers.
You mean animating using JavaScript?
Yeah.
GreenSock over JavaScript.
Yes, the GreenSock library is probably the best thing out there for animating SVG with JavaScript, because there's a lot of browser quirks.
So I have a question.
Yes.
A lot of times I'll see some really sweet D3 visualizations or something, and I don't know what's going on, so I'll inspect source and I'll see that it is SVG being animated by something, and I assume the D3 has some sort of...
Yeah, it's got helper functions for animation. So if you don't have anything fancy, then absolutely use that. But GreenSock is nice because it does a lot of stuff for you that you might want to do. But the other real part that's really nice is it has an online web app that gives you a timeline like Flash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the really nice part.
GreenSock is a library, or
It's
just like it sounds?
It's like a company, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it is a company. It is their flagship product. They used to have libraries for Flash, and then they moved to HTML5 for obvious reasons. Yeah, so So basically, the JavaScript library is free because that would be super easy to steal. But some of the stuff like their support costs money. But in the end, you know, it's whatever. Let's see one of their demos here if it's any good.
Yeah, I've seen this before.
Their perf is garbage. Let's not do that. Okay.
So GreenSock is for a library to animate SVG.
It animates everything, as it turns out. It just happens to be very good at SVG also.
Okay. What about SMIL? How do you
SMIL? Yeah, SMIL is actually.
But there, on CSS trick about Smile is out, and then the Smile A or something came. What was that?
Yeah. So basically, what happens is Chrome is like, we're going to get rid of Smile, and everyone's like, what are you going to replace it with? And they're like, what? And they're like, aren't you going to replace it with something? And they're like, And then people were like, that's not good enough. We should have something to replace it with, and that's what started the Web Animation API, which is a new effort to have CSS and JavaScript animate anything on the web, which includes SVG in this case. So that's not in browsers yet. If you download like Firefox Developer Edition, it actually ships with some excellent.
Is that like the nightly build thing?
It's
A different browser actually.
It's more stable than the nightly build.
Oh, okay.
It updates like maybe twice a month, something like that. But it comes with a slick theme. It's more compact than usual. It's dark by default, and the dev tools have like additional powerful stuff in there, like an animation editor. If you're like editing the timing function on a CSS animation, it actually gives you a Bezier curve to drag around. It's really neat.
And this is Firefox Web Developer.
Yeah, I will.
I'm adding all these links in the chat as well.
I'm just gonna put it up on the big screen.
Yeah, that works too.
So this is a separate browser, kind of. So it's kind of like Chrome Canary in that you can run it next to your usual browser, and it's got like a little blueprint icon there. So this is it showing off its animation interface actually right here. So these are all various animations, and here's the timeline that they start and stop at. You know, all sorts of stuff like that.
It's like an After Effects.
Yep, exactly. I'm pretty sure they stole most of it from After Effects because they knew it worked. Stuff like the web audio editor where you can like edit the waveforms in real time.
I mean, that kind of interface was around long before After Effects.
Yeah. Yeah, so Smile was a set of other XML elements that you could use to declaratively animate SVG. And they weren't very popular because they're kind of ugly and unwieldy, and Chrome wants to deprecate them, and Internet Explorer never supported them. But except for the browsers that support CSS animations in SVG, it's the only way to get animated SVGs in an image file. Because by default, JavaScript won't work if you call the SVG with like an image tag. You have to like include it in the page or use the object tag instead.
So if you wanted to animate an SVG that you included the image tag with the source attribute,
yeah,
you would use animate tags.
Yeah, you would use Smile and CSS for the browsers that don't support Smile, and nothing for Internet Explorer. It would just be not animated. So if you really need to animate an SVG, do it in JavaScript with the object tag if you want to pull it in separately, or put it in line like we're doing with the HTML here. Yeah. Let's see. What is something else? So. In fact, IE9 supports SVG gradients, but it doesn't support CSS ones, so you may have to use those at some point. So, you know, make a background image out of SVG instead and set up a gradient. So.
You know, that gradient generator online, the one
Yeah.
that does that automatically. There. How far back do you guys care about supporting 90? Like realistically, you guys didn't care about 99?
At work, we officially dropped IE8 and had a party.
Say it again?
We officially dropped IE8 support and celebrated.
That's cool. Yeah, I just got out of work for the government, so we had to do IE8 until fairly recently too.
Yeah.
But out here in the real world, I was wondering like how far back.
I did a project the past 2 weeks. I had to build some templates supporting IA8.
Really?
So the grid I had to use, I mean, it sounds like, oh, no. I decided to use was a float-based grid instead of I was looking into Flexbox, which I use for my site, which is amazing. I mean, I cut down the use of media queries by half.
Easily. Yeah.
Right on. And there is a polyfill for if you're using Flexbox for your layout for IA8.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Or you could use display table in IE8 as well. That can work for some things. Not everything Flexbox does, but
Yeah.
some things it works very well.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with everything you have to do to get back to IE8. I was just wondering what you guys care about.
Yeah.
How, like being professional outside of DoD, I want to know how far back people care about supporting. Like,
I think
you know,
10 really started getting sweeter.
Yeah, 10 is a pretty good browser.
Yeah.
And then IE11 was in fact an even better browser. And now Edge, I would say, is competitive.
Edge is incredibly faster.
Mm-hmm.
and how do you make people test IE? Use a VM?
Yeah, Microsoft offers free VMs.
Okay. Yeah, I like Apple.
Modern IE.
I
Do you guys
use those
use that?
myself. Yeah, I'm still PC based, but I still get that so I can check the native. I found at work my previous job.
Gonna make this bigger.
And just going into say Edge or whatever and changing the emulation to an old browser is not accurate.
Exactly. Disaster.
Oh, yeah, it's really bad.
IE10 is actually what gave us the most trouble. Compared to
Yeah, Edge for that. And
I'm gonna make this nice and big, so it's easier to see what's going on. So the nice thing about gradients in SVG is that if you wanted to, you could totally, take the JavaScript, go in there and change the stop color attribute or the offset attribute or something like that.
So IE9 will even do multi-stop.
Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. Because I think that's the big thing with IE9. It'll do gradients, but only.
Oh yeah, it's those prog ID image transform garbage. Yeah. So.
That ultimate CSS gradient generator.
Yeah. Use an SVG file instead.
Yeah.
You'll be glad you did. Let's see.
You can do shit.
I personally never
And this works too.
include any filter prog IDs on in my CSS because that's actually JavaScript running in the CSS. And
Is it really?
Yeah, that's a JavaScript.
That sounds like a bad idea.
It's a really bad
Oh
idea.
my god.
Yeah, it's very, very bad. So I'm amazed at how these whatever generators.
Isn't that exploitable?
Yes.
I mean, that's insane. I didn't know that's.
Right, and affects performance.
You know what's even worse? You could call from CSS binary components that would hook into the underlying Windows comm system. There's a reason why IE6 was banned by the federal government for being insecure.
Wow.
So you can have radial gradients too. In fact, syntax is identical. All you have to do is change linear to radial, that sort of thing.
Funny how you change the tag name at the top, but
Yeah,
the bottom is the old one and still understands it.
Yeah, gotta love HTML, right? It'll accept anything and you accept it. If this were a standalone SVG file, like XML style, it would yell at you. So,
XML, that's not the point. XML says it's extremely strict.
yeah.
But the browsers, it's really up to the browsers. Like I remember when, was it Firefox? I don't know if it was Firefox or early Netscape. I don't know who it was, but they started automatically closing tags for you.
Yeah.
And because they remember hand coding tables. Oh my god.
Oh, that actually predates HTML. HTML's grandfather, SGML, that was specified there.
Oh really?
Yeah. So the browsers were actually being spec compliant on that
That was
one.
the first one, then HTML. Come on.
No, it was HTML and then HTML.
HTML is like the great. The HTML, yeah.
That was
Everything
the
came
first-
from HTML.
Yeah.
That was the first markup I
Right.
saw.
And it never worked, by the way. HTML was so complicated and so unwieldy, nobody ever implemented the entire thing.
It was
Yeah,
terrible.
fine.
In fact, HTML was not even a markup language. It was a language for making markup languages. You could specify, like, Wikipedia syntax using HTML, and it would still work.
Oh, wow.
That's how powerful and unwieldy and ultimately dead HTML is, because it did too much and no one could program everything that it
It
specified.
was years later that I even made the connection that that was related to actual web stuff that I was doing. I was in college. Somebody's like, look at this guy's home directory, because I don't know if you remember back then, nobody kept anything locked down. It was like, here's permission, everything was open in your Unix accounts. And people would just have like their scientific documents all marked up so that they would display cool. And I forgot what the display thing was back then. I think
Tex.
Was it just X?
Might have been Tex, I think. TEX.
Oh, no, there was an actual, we had not grayscale, we had black and or white, 21-inch friggin' X terms. There was a browser of some kind that would actually render.
Oh yeah, that's the line mode browser.
It was crazy. I was just like, and I saw it, I'm like, I don't even understand what's happening right now.
Yeah, that was the second browser that was ever built, I think, by Tim Berners-Lee himself.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that was amazing stuff. And then later I was like, oh, you know, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's see, what's something else that's cool about? Oh, I know.
Canvas gradients?
Say what?
Canvas gradient? Describing the gradients?
Is this a SVG property?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on track.
Oh, okay. No.
I'm snooping around it again.
So hyperlinks in SVG are almost identical to HTML, except it does this. That was a mistake. Everyone admits it was a mistake.
I don't know what that even means.
Good. You don't want to know.
Okay.
It was a bad XML experiment that never went anywhere. The good news is that SVG2 is making it unnecessary, so you can just do that and get rid of it. But for backwards compatibility, you're going to want to put xlink in front of your graph. And so you can link any element, text, shapes, with SVG. And unlike HTML, where it's like, you may see something different, but it's still just a box in the end, and you'll always have that. In SVG, it won't actually do the pointer until you hover over the actual shape. And this works even for things like, let's see here.
So this is instead of just putting it in your HTML, like the SVG inside of an
Yes.
tag.
So like you can see normally in HTML, like, no amount of border radius would stop you from being able to click that. But in SVG, you can have non-rectangular hit areas.
That could be really useful, like mapping and stuff.
That's pretty interesting.
And it has most of the attributes you'd expect from
Really?
HTML ones. It has target that doesn't have xlink in front of it because God knows.
Oh, really?
It is for showing hover text.
Oh, that's what I was getting at, like literally not. Okay, yeah.
That doesn't always work.
So you mentioned SVG2.
Yes.
Is that live, or are some browsers still implementing that, or can you use that?
Okay. SVG2 is the spec right now is currently being worked on. They did this big survey where they were like, okay, what do you want out of SVG? What is something that has been driving you crazy that you can't do? And then they took all those suggestions and they basically wrote them all up. And they're still working on specifying the nitty-gritty stuff. But it's things like, say, mesh gradients, which are like normal gradients but extraordinarily powerful. Like you could render a photorealistic rubber ducky with mesh gradients if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I've seen those in Photoshop.
Yeah.
I believe.
Stuff
Or
like
Illustrator.
and stuff like cross hatching. I think they added that in SVG2.
For shading and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, so you can be like, so see how I'm saying fill URL gradient?
Mm-hmm.
Instead it would be like a hatch element with an ID,
Mm-hmm.
and then it would fill that with the cross hatching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's see. What else is cool about SVG?
If you guys want, I can show you the logo with the text that I came up with.
Here's something where I actually did at work for. Say what? Yeah. And
Like, I get to have fun.
so this is a responsive SVG without a view box. You can see there isn't one here. It's got the XML garbage in there because it's supposed to be a standalone file. That's not important.
Wait, oh, you mean that whole border, that whole thing's SVG?
This whole thing is SVG. And so here's the cool part is watch the lines next to that box.
Oh, cool.
What just happened?
They,
They get clipped from the
they go
board.
behind the
Yep.
gray border around the.
Yep, there is a mask that is using that icon to hide the lines that are making up that border.
Do it again.
The box is inside a rectangle.
Yeah.
Kind of? Yeah. It's a little trickier. Oh, I know what I'm going to show you guys that's super cool about SVG.
And you can use SVGs as backgrounds, right?
In your workbook.
I use it. Yeah, I use it when making graphics for our website. So background images a lot, icons, clickable.
Simple line art, really.
Yeah, because that's what Excel's at. If you have a photograph, you want to use a JPEG. Like, don't even try to use an SVG with that. So here's something that's really cool.
There's probably something else that would.
Yeah, and you would end up with the biggest file you've ever seen.
Yeah, there you go.
So the use element clones whatever you point its excellent graph at.
That's so cool. Then you can override it.
Yeah, and then you can add your own attributes on top of it and just do
You have
stuff.
base class. You just copy base class.
Yeah.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, and you.
That's really simple. So for my particular example, the radius of that's so cool.
Yeah.
Just copy, rotate, copy.
Yep.
Because I mean, you could,
Gonna use
if
it
you
tomorrow,
just
right?
create it's basically a DOM element at that point, and you could manipulate it however you want.
You guys heard about that shadow DOM nonsense that everyone's talking about?
You don't mean like how React uses a version DOM?
No, it's this weird thing that browsers haven't specified yet. But
Okay.
this is basically what it's going to be: is the use element.
Oh, wow.
You want to see something really ridiculous? Record it. Okay, what's a impressive HTML? I know. So we've got before an object element, we just put some regular old HTML in there. And I forgot to put a width and height on it. Easy. No, that was a mistake, yeah. Okay, so here we have the SVG element, and it's scaled the HTML element. And it doesn't work super well because it's been scaled up and the select element is some hot garbage, but just don't use the select element, use like actual nicely well-behaved elements.
This is ridiculous. So,
So
what?
foreign
Is this
object.
supported? Is this well supported?
For an object, everything but IE. So even edge, but not IE.
Okay.
How would you use that and why would you?
Oh, that's because it lets you do things like apply filters to the HTML element. Even in IE, well, no, not in IE.
You can make some really sweet checkboxes or something, or do all kinds of neat stuff without having to do a custom graphic.
Yeah, really, it's one of those things that doesn't seem super obvious we can do it at first. But for example, say you had a pseudo element that you needed to be a little fancier than just some text, right? Make an SVG image file that contains HTML inside of it, and bam, you have a fancy pseudo element.
There you go.
It won't be interactive because it's still technically an element, but sometimes you just need it to look a certain way. So here's
One of the things with the U, where do you have that part? I think up above foreign object.
yeah.
You see how he cloned the same another SVG. This is a technique used for icons, for example. So you have a sprite with social icons.
There we go.
I've done this. And it's very powerful. So you have the SVG, you put it up there in the top, and wherever it is that the icon goes, you just
Right.
use the one use tag, xlink,
Mhm.
reference the ID of that specific graphic you need in the whole chunk of SVG,
Okay.
and it'll paint it right there.
That's perfect.
And you don't have to mess around with background positioning of any kind. It just clones that little piece of the entire.
Perfect.
Oh,
So
I
does-
see.
the-
And it's not, it's like a SVG sprite.
Yeah,
Right.
an SVG sprite.
Do you want to know something even cooler?
Yeah.
you don't have to put it in the HTML file itself.
Well, exactly. That's what I did my first time. I called an SVG file because I didn't want, it was kind of large, so I didn't want to embed it in the HTML.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Funny thing is, it did work for the project, and it worked. But then I tried it again for something else several months after, and didn't think it worked. Something was wrong, or so, I don't know.
Into a loop, and you've got an animated.
Oh, yeah, there you go. It's
If
just,
you step through the sprites.
it's the
Oh,
sprites
yep.
were all
Yes,
animations.
Yeah, so you can totally have
This is awesome.
you can totally have the use element pull in an external SVG file.
Mhm.
Again, that doesn't work in Internet Explorer, but there's a JavaScript polyfill out there to make that happen.
Okay, I need to know specifically, like, okay, if you make the SVG file with all your icons, say,
Mhm.
and you just load that somewhere and don't
Mhm.
display it, is what,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
just somewhere, and then,
You comment it out, or?
Oh no, you can't comment it out, but you
Yeah.
can use display none.
You do
on it.
display none, because the good thing about display none in this case is that you have to be aware that using display none on things can have a negative effect for accessibility,
Oh,
because anything that is display none, it will not be read out.
Right.
But in this case, you want display none not read out out loud by the machine, but accessible programmatically,
and,
right?
yeah.
And then the use element is read out loud.
So
Right,
you have an
correct.
Wait,
SVG
does that
file
have to
that
be
with
in
all
this?
these icons on it.
Mhm.
And you're going
Oh,
to
this?
use
Yeah.
that element
Yeah, so in
as well.
HTML you would have this.
How do
And you just
you,
pop that.
because
because
each one of those elements
Has an ID.
Has an ID of SVG. Yeah.
Right, so if you have ID Twitter, ID Facebook, ID whatever.
So yeah,
See where it says element ID?
Yeah.
Hash, element ID, that's where you put the of the icon you're
You
looking
just say,
for.
literally use
Twitter.
just like
So it would be
CSS.
sprites dot
Yeah,
Oh my god, that works. This is awesome.
Hashtag
yeah. So
the name of the Twitter,
Yes.
inside of the SVG file,
the sprite SVG file.
yeah, you would have some element here, and then you would give it an ID, and then you would, so your gear icon, you would say gear.
All right.
And then if this matches one of the IDs in the file, it will only display that small bit.
This is,
Yeah.
I mean, we're approaching almost like really you could just load a font of symbols, I guess, and do it, but this is, I guess, better because you have more control over it.
Yeah, and fonts have like rendering issues across platforms, and they're really hard to make accessible. Like it's really difficult. But an SVG sprite, you could have to.
You mean a font icon? I had to make those for buttons on the bottom of an app.
Those are troublesome. If you can use SVG, absolutely do. It's
Yeah.
much less difficult.
A browser's not going to really refuse an
There's a
SVG
native
either.
app.
Like fonts, your fonts don't always load. They just
Yeah, and iOS content blockers now let you specify to block web fonts specifically.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then there's other stuff like people with dyslexia will often put in their own font because otherwise, it's a pain in the butt to read, and then that overwrites your icon font.
Yeah.
So, sorry, an abrupt change in topic.
Yeah.
Animation. You got those two gradients. Can you make that into a sweep hand and a watch face?
Yes, with
And a
JavaScript.
pivot on the handle of that thing. How would you do that? Because I tried to do that for my logo on my blog, and I had the darndest time trying to make it rotate on a specific feed.
Yeah, so SVG has the transform property that just like HTML, but it works differently. That's the hard part. When in HTML you say rotate, it rotates around the HTML element's center. In SVG, by default, it rotates around 0.00.
If you're gonna do it with CSS,
Yeah.
do transform origin.
Yeah.
You can transfer.
Yeah, that was only recently supported in Firefox. That was the issue, I think, is that that was like Firefox 37 and above. So now you're probably safe, but for a while there,
Well, there's a perfect case in your view box to put your origin not at 0, right? And then
oh, it's at 00 anyway.
oh,
It's just weird.
would that work if you?
Oh, well, yeah, actually, you could make your view box so that 00 was your center
is in
point.
the center?
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, that might even be easier to code because everything's going to be spinning around 00,
Mhm.
almost like the unit circle.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like change the.
Yeah, you could delete it.
The orientation you have in.
And as far as accessibility goes, SVG gives you two elements for that. So say we're pulling in our sprite, and then the element is basically your alt text. I don't actually have the sprite sheet, so we can't see anything. And then the desk element is kind of like long desk. If you really needed, to explain what's going on, for the settings button, you probably wouldn't. But
yeah, but for accessibility stuff's killer.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the browser support is a little weird right now. Some stuff does it, some stuff doesn't. So what you would want to do is that, and then you would set. Yeah. So that would make sure everything gets it. But you wouldn't do that yourself. You'd have a machine do that. You would have PHP loop through every single SVG icon,
sure,
and then put IDs on the title and area labeled by the SVG, something like that.
Yeah, or just if you use a template, if you use something that you see, just
Yep.
CMS.
Can you show real fast the one-liner for calling an SVG and a PNG for fallback?
Yes.
What's that for?
So you need
fallback, yeah.
So you need an image for IE8.
Mm-hmm.
So you create the SVG, but you need a PNG. So it's going to be
Yeah. So you would have your ping file or whatever in your image element, because that's how you do. And then the easiest way to opt into browsers that do support it is to do this. Because all browsers that understand source set also understand SVG. The overlap isn't perfect, so like some older browsers that do support SVG but not source set will give you the ping, but those are so little at this point, and the ping will probably be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the easiest way to do it with image. With CSS,
What's the 1x?
oh, source set lets you describe how big an image is compared to like pixel density.
Mm-hmm.
So for like Retina screens, you would have 2x or something like that, and it would only load that if it was Retina.
It's like, yeah.
Query.
Yeah.
2x.
But since it's 1x, that's literally anything, so everything will load that SVG, which in this case is exactly what we want. If it understands source set, it'll understand that.
Okay.
And you can use the picture element if you want like a little more control.
these are
This one?
because
Oh, really?
Chrome they both understand source and they both understand source.
No, you would think that, but if source set is on an element, all browsers that support it ignore source. They don't use it. To them, it doesn't exist.
Why?
Why?
I don't know.
Have you tested otherwise?
No. I was thinking about this actually.
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
So because we have an image, I'm going to put the URL here. You have an SVG tag, and inside you have an image tag, not an IMG.
Yeah. Here. So we're gonna.
So the image tag is the HTML tag.
Yeah.
This you won't get double download.
It'll all make sense in a minute.
Yeah.
And then you do
Yeah. Right. Okay.
this.
So that's a little blurry. Let's.
Yes, and then might get on CodePen Slack.
Yeah, so it's a little stretchy because that's how SVG does by default. So in this case, only browsers that understand SVG will load this image at all, because they're the only ones that understand the X-link ref attribute.
Okay.
Now you can do this. Browsers that aren't down with the SVG.
Yeah.
They'll go through this and they'll be like, I don't know what this is. This is some sort of weird div.
Yeah.
And then, as it turns out, browsers, way back when the image tag was first introduced, people did not know how to spell it correctly, because IMG is actually kind of a bad abbreviation.
Uh-huh.
So all browsers, if they encounter image spelled out like that
Oh.
outside of an SVG tag,
Uh-huh.
they will consider it like a normal image tag, which means this will work.
Right.
That is.
So the idea in this case would be like Xlink ref would point to the SVG version of an image, and then source would point to the fallback ping.
Okay. The
So-
Xlink's there just
right.
for the click.
And this does cause a double download in Internet Explorer. So if you need to support that, that's what you can do. But IE9 will support Xlink ref SVG anyway, because IE9 does SVG. So this technique isn't as useful as it used to be. In fact, I would say you don't even have
But
to
it's
use it anymore.
interesting.
Yeah, it is a nice, interesting quirk of HTML. Yeah, as far as these go, SVG can pull in raster attributes, and it will treat them like any.
Just in the beginning of this, you said how widely supported it is.
Yeah. No, not in my job.
Okay.
Since we dropped IE8, everything supports it.
Okay, great.
But like maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you had to. Yeah.
Okay.
When I used it back at that one project, the icons would just not display accessible. The content was accessible, reusable, indexable. That's my philosophy with legacy browsers. As long as the content is accessible, indexable, usable, you're doing good there.
Yeah.
So you can apply filters to just regular old image elements. And they can pull in other SVG files. You don't like get to reach in and play with them necessarily, but sometimes you just need them as their pixels to show up.
Yeah, I was thinking with that text thing in your comic book deal, if you couldn't fit all the text in it, you could just kind of probably make it like some JavaScript, have it kind of scrolled through. You know what I mean? Like the thought balloon could be checking out.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, the big weakness of SVG is that you cannot wrap text in it. Like, if it gets smaller, the text won't reflow automatically. Which, in some cases, that's what you want. With like a speech balloon, it has to fit inside the balloon anyway.
Which was exactly how I wanted it to work last night, because I should show you that I declare the font size in pixels. I was working at a certain dimension. And then I went ahead and resized the divider in CodePen, and the logo just shrinked. I was like, holy crap, I didn't think that the font was going to shrink at 95 or whatever pixels I had. I mean, it's pixels. You think it was just going to stay like that. No, it just...
Yeah. So what you can do if you really need wrap text is you can have separate SVG elements and then wrap those like normal.
Oh, I didn't mean wrap. I meant literally like have it scroll through.
You can't do that, unfortunately.
Like you couldn't.
SVG doesn't do scroll bars.
No. Like like.
Oh, like a marquee?
Marquee the text.
Yeah, you could do that.
JavaScript or something.
You could do that. Yeah, for sure. And you can use like media queries inside your SVG to like. Yeah.
This
So
is insane.
it's like you can't use the X attribute in most browsers yet, but you could have a use element referencing the original element and then position somewhere else, and then your media query would hide the original one and show the use version. So a little more work, but same result in the end.
I want to see the extruding.
Extruding?
Yeah, I mean, say Richard's logo, Ricardo's logo.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to show you the logo. Here, let me have the connection real fast. Then we're going to raffle my second book.
I bought your book this week.
Oh, this book?
No.
Oh, the other book?
The other one, yeah.
Ah.
You're right, well, I mean, it's clear.
Thank you.
As far as wrapping text goes, though, that was the #1 request for SVG2, so that made it in.
I love the section.
Yeah. In fact, it's been in other SVG specifications that Inkscape implemented, but no browser did.
Oh, and by the way, with Ricardo, you were talking about scaling the text in your logo, and you're surprised that it scaled. Did you ever try setting your font size to a VW?
Yes.
It's awesome. That's like my favorite thing to do.
That's all I use.
Oh, it looks weird.
Yeah, isn't it great?
Yes.
Like,
That is. When I first started working with responsive, I don't know what you guys did, but when I was dealing with responsive for the first time, my mental model was when I set the font in EMs, is proportionate to its parent, so the parent's going to be smaller. Text is just going to be small and big, and it was just wrapping. I'm like, 1 second. So you just it's right on that concept of I mean, all the viewport units.
You do want to do one extra step with VW though, because by default, if you zoom in or out with your browser, it doesn't change, which can be good for some things, but for accessibility purposes, you really want that to work. And so the trick to get around that is calc 1M plus viewport units, or like any unit plus viewport units. And so that'll give you like a minimum size that it has to be, so it can't get any smaller. And then it makes it so it'll get bigger when you zoom in.
So you're saying like do calc one
What's
and times.
I used it last week.
Or plus, whatever ends up with the size that you like.
Oh, okay. Just as long. Yeah, I
For
got
those
it.
templates.
Yeah, as long as you have a absolute unit in there somewhere that people can zoom in on. Yeah.
Okay.
So for something where it's like you want to make sure an element is always like only so much of the viewport, then don't use that. But for like a font size that you want people to be able to zoom in on, definitely do that.
I only use it for something like a splash screen where you just want all that perfect composition the first time.
Yeah.
Full height, whatever the browser is. Color.
Okay, cool. Let me show you what I did. All right, so this logo here is full SVG, which is what you see here. I have full SVG here, and that's how long it is. At the bottom, you only have these two collapsed containers. So pretty much the scroll you see here is the size of the first SVG. The second SVG, this one, is exported directly from Fireworks, and you can see there's no styling of the font is being called. I mean, the right font face is being used, but there's no styling, and there's the location is weird. So that's
You would need to convert the outlines probably to get it to look like that.
yeah, but so it's pretty much the same. But look how much. Look at the scroll bar here. How much it cut from the original SVG file. So that was a big plus there. Same with this one. Now the difference here is right here at the bottom. So when it came to scaling, this is what I was referring to.
Right.
And this is what I want in this case. Now I left
But
it.
that's still SVG text, but it's still scaling.
Yeah, correct. So this is
Okay.
this is selectable.
Yeah.
And all that.
Yeah, SVG basically, when you use text, it treats it like any other graphics element, but it's still text in the end.
Now I have to say that the R is getting cut here in the A because I did this on my Windows PC last night. So there goes the font thing.
Oh, yeah.
Chrome, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you want to know a trick to
What's that?
guard against that? SVG text has a attribute text length. And you can give it a length value, and then if the web font doesn't
Like
load
this?
for whatever reason, yep. So go ahead and put in, some M value or whatever. Oh dear, what happened?
CodePen.
It's not that special an attribute.
Not to reload. All right. Okay, let's go do it here. Text length.
Yeah, and it doesn't work on a T-span. You have to put it on text, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Maybe that was why.
So go ahead and just put in any length that you care for. And if this reloads, which it hasn't yet, rare.
Why is your voice echoing? Google Hangout?
Where is it echoing?
When he speaks, I hear his voice come out of, I think, the TV.
Ah,
No,
yeah,
so-
they hang out. It's going through a microphone.
Yeah, my bad.
Sorry.
It's fine. I just was freaking out.
Okay, it doesn't seem to be working in this case. That's unfortunate.
We believe you.
Yeah. There's got to be some variable I'm not controlling for here. But basically, it's like if the web font doesn't load, squash and stretch the text to be exactly this width. So for something like this, where, it has to fit perfectly, yeah. Yeah.
So can you exaggerate that?
Well, it should be exaggerated right now because 1M is like real tiny.
You're supposed to have a unit on it?
You mean M as in M unit or M as in letter M?
Yeah.
As in the
Yeah.
unit. Yeah, it takes any unit. I'm pretty sure. Maybe just do 20. Maybe that's where I went wrong. It's just the number 20.
Oh, okay.
I got this working, so I know this works, but I'm sure I'm forgetting something.
Let's see if it reloads. Oh, okay, so it's CodePen. It's not reloading.
I don't know, did you plan, when we came in, you
There it
guys
is.
were doing the side-by-side comparison of your two spinning logos.
Oh, yeah, we see that.
When I say the extruding, that's where I wanted to see, was you
Yeah.
get the flat, I wanted to see
The 3D.
three-dimensional.
Oh, the 3DZ and the Spark box? Yeah, I can put them up. But I wanted to show you this because I have a few things here that I didn't know about. The first one is this. So I ended up using magic numbers. You know what magic numbers mean? Is when you're positioning something in CSS and you come up with these numbers that fit your specific moment. But it changes, but next day is a different environment, different screen width, different elements around. That magic number is not going to work. You need to change it to something else. That's what a magic number is. So I ended up with this, like 53 is the magic number that I ended up with for the distance of the web designer under the top name. And here the translate is, I just made it, had to move, if I move, this is the positioning from the X axis. So let's see if it renders.
I don't think that translate may have worked. Oh,
Some
because it
performance
didn't.
that it could,
Yeah.
and why don't you comment out the other two divs, the two sections?
Okay.
Hmm.
No, that's funny.
Yeah, it's going to be more responsive.
But I don't want to delete the other two.
Copy, paste them somewhere else.
Anyway, I think so. That's what on about the T-span tag. No, just that's basically what I did last night. I spent a couple of
Why
hours
is it a
doing it
magic number? Because it works everywhere for you?
because it worked in this situation.
Only.
But what happened is that it actually ended up like the font size that I have right here. Where's the name? Font size. See a 0.3? I was just trying to mimic visually what I had in my logo to what the font. And I didn't care if it was a magic number. I just wanted it to work. And what happens is that it actually works because the thing is 95 pixels and shrinks, which is exactly what I need.
Is it trial and error that you got?
That is awesome.
Yeah.
It was trial and error?
Yeah.
And you can be assured it works because nothing will mess with it inside of SVG. There won't be like another element pushing it out of the way or anything like that.
That is super cool. In fact, that solves like massive.
Yeah, though in this case, it could be even easier if Ricardo just put text anchor middle on the text.
Oh, actually, I did. It's right here.
Oh, is that how it works in the first place?
Tensacre middle.
Gotcha. Well, go to your text and where you have your X attributes, I believe. Yeah. Oh, you have it going on already. And then you set the X to 0 for the T-spans?
Well, this is where I went, I looked in Stack Overflow, and there was a demo of a J's fiddle of a guy that had this same structure.
Yeah.
So I was like, crap, that's kind of what I need. I just need to position it. So I got him, copied it, changed the values on the T-spans, and started playing with these numbers. And I knew text anchor middle was part of what we needed to, it was kind of what worked. Let's see if it renders.
This is your window for your
There.
file.
So honestly, there are a lot of things here that at this point, I can't wrap my head around how exactly it worked.
Yeah.
But at least I've done it. I have the experience. Next time that I have to deal with it is where you know what I'm saying? That's the.
Yeah. Do you want to know a trick for your dy attribute? You can actually put in 1M, and it'll move it down by the font size of the word.
Right here?
Yeah. So it may not be perfect in this case because the font. Yeah, there you go. And because you know the font size is the size of the text. If it's like 1M, that's always one line height down.
But it absolutely keeps it relative with the scaling.
Yeah. So if the font size were ever to change, then it would position itself automatically.
This is almost why they put the doc type in there, because it really is its own little entity, an SVG. It's like it really is its own little document.
Yeah.
With its own little universe. That's why they probably still think the doc type. If you loaded the SVG in the browser without all the doc type stuff, would it still work?
Yeah.
Oh.
The doc type is actually it doesn't do anything in XML. It's only if you want to validate the document.
Oh.
So if you're serving an XML document over the web, you don't need it. Yeah, the doc types only do something in HTML because they had to figure out some way to tell old pages from new pages, and doc type was a way of doing that.
Yeah, this is awesome. That's so awesome. Okay, how are you doing?
This is a challenge from one of our guests. Last CodePen here, actually. There's a. Oh, actually, full page.
You may be able to hear that this might not be something you want to do on mobile because it's already
Okay.
giving Ricardo's MacBook a good workout.
Use 3D.
Yeah, so this is 3D.js. My pen, my Z is inspired by Brian's Sparkbox logo. So that's not D3. What am I saying? I'm thinking about Michael Bowman.
Cool. Oh, that's
Yeah, so
that's
And
fun.
the orbital control, what was that mean?
what was that?
The orbital control plugin,
Yeah.
you needed that for the ability to
Do-
movements.
Yeah, you
Control
can
grab.
drag and orbit
This,
using the cursor. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, nice.
Yeah, so on both pens you can drag around and see. Can you zoom in? Yeah. You can do that on mine too. But I took it a little further where I
love
actually
the horizon points.
I know. It's awesome.
I use that's all planned, and Kareem helped me do that part. So I actually went a little further
And the
and
shadows
used
awesome.
some fog.
Awesome.
Fog.
Really?
Is that in the plugin, the library?
Yes. So there's two different types of fogs. I play with it a little so there's fog with it. I play with the lights. I did my research about how to light stuff to make it look nice. So if you want 3 lights and whatever.
Looks like it's on a soccer field or something.
Yeah. So I wanted a plane so you can have more depth perception.
Mm-hmm.
Technically speaking, it's just is the same as Brian's. I just went a little further in the experience and probably the design a little, because that's kind of where so I capitalize on that. But the technology, the coding behind it is all based on Brian's, with a little help from the Okay, so let's go ahead and stop, pause there for a second, and can we do the picnic?
Yeah. My phone gets so hot when I go to your website. That's
My phone exploded. do the picker?
Yeah,
Oh, I
well,
already turned
we're gonna
it
use the
on.
picme.io service.
She doesn't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, Brian's gonna load it, so we're gonna explain.
It is a
So, you wanna load it?
random